All right, let's get started. Thank you all for joining us today for our roundtable discussion on real life strategies for managing mental health. We have convened a group of three experts to discuss holiday stress and anxiety. Three program directors from Rhode Island, New Hampshire, Massachusetts, and New York. Good afternoon. I'm Gary Diorsi, Director of Development for Real Help. We are a provider of virtual mental health services in Rhode Island, Massachusetts, New York, and New Hampshire. Um, so our three program directors are Kimberly Silvestri, Mariana Knight, and Ulyssa Lopez, all licensed either mental health counselors or licensed social workers. So with that, let me turn it over to Kimberly to get us started. Kimberly.
Hello, everybody. I appreciate you coming today. What I want to talk about is beyond the tinsel, so holiday stress and anxiety. And when you think of the holiday, we often picture, times of joy, happiness, family moments together. You see commercials, Christmas music, the Hallmark movies. Everything is always perfect and everything is working out great. Unfortunately, we know, in real life that sometimes isn't the case. The holiday seasons can bring us a lot of stress. Our schedules become more stressful between trying to manage family expectations, financial pressures of getting the perfect gift and gift giving, getting holiday cards and sending out holiday letters and work parties, kids being out of school over break for extended period of time. What about childcare? Who's going to watch my child if I have to work? And just the constant message we get sometimes through society and just social media in general of, the holidays have to be merry and bright. It's easy to kind of feel anxious or drained or nervous about that, thinking, trying to find it to be perfect. And again, we know it's no one's perfect and it can never be 100% perfect. And that's okay. It doesn't mean you're doing the holidays wrong. It just means we're human and really looking at the stressors and things that we have and understanding that, can create some anxiety, being around family, being around friends, really looking at how do we manage our schedules along those lines and setting healthy boundaries with family and friends as well, learning to say no and being okay with that during the holidays. So that way we take care of ourselves and reduce some of that stress and anxiety that can happen around the holidays.
Great, thanks, Kimberly. The first question I want to throw out is signs that might indicate that holiday stress or anxiety is starting to affect you. How do we know?
Well, a lot of times it really just may start out slow because again, we're just getting into the holiday season now. We have Thanksgiving next week, then we have Christmas and kind of the New Year stress of, things are going to be new year, new me, stressors that we put upon ourselves. So really, I think it's looking at, are we starting to get more irritable? Are we starting to feel more tired or exhausted? Are we having trouble sleeping, just kind of feeling restless, kind of on edge? Kind of some people would have like kind of a racing heart, like feel like their heart, their heart's racing a little bit, may get a little sweaty, may start to feel tightness in the chest sometimes. And it may even create anxiety attacks, just depending on the level of stress that you are having in your life. So really looking at, your schedule and are we saying yes to too many things? Like we said, family parties, things at work, gift giving and finding that perfect gift and putting ourselves under all these stressors. So those are some of the kind of common symptoms we may see that kind of start to see maybe I need to step back and reevaluate like what I'm doing to feel better.
Yeah, uh, anxiety, it really hits people in different ways. What can you do when like anxiety is literally closing your throat?
Well, I mean, I think the biggest thing is, some really kind of take a step back. Mindfulness techniques can be really helpful. Deep breathing exercises can be really helpful. Finding those things that bring you calmness, that are hobbies or relaxation techniques that you can use. If you like to draw, if you like to listen to music, it can be very powerful. Going for a walk, nature, animals, friends. Sometimes having those social things can actually help, not hinder. So really, I think looking at that, biggest thing though is really setting realistic expectations. I think protecting those boundaries. Um, Sometimes journaling, reaching out to people you trust. Again, sometimes this is a really common time for people maybe to start therapy because again, there may be family traumas and issues and things that come up during the holidays that maybe make it difficult to go to people's houses and the preparation to do that. So I think prioritizing your health, eating, exercise, nutrition, all those things really can help you prevent the burnout.
Awesome, thank you. those self-care strategies like breathing and journaling or taking short breaks, which one actually help you reset when you're really feeling overwhelmed?
Well, again, I mean, that is personal. Everybody has their own techniques and things that they can use. So again, I always say, I've worked with clients where they say mindfulness breathing, take deep breathe, and kind of take deep breaths and things, and it doesn't work. And they're like, it just doesn't work. So again, then looking at other grounding techniques that can be helpful. Sometimes it could be just, sitting in a quiet space, watching your favorite movie, having, a cup of coffee, or going sitting outside and, looking at the stars. There's so many different things. So it's really customizing and trying the things that work best for you. There's no one size fits all in terms of kind of a coping skill that works for everyone. So it's really identifying your strengths and your hobbies and interests and tying into something along those lines, because that's going to be the most successful to really help you kind of reset and stay calm during those stressful times.
Great. Thank you, Kimberly. And for everyone listening in, if you have a question, I forgot to mention, you can type that question into the Q&A box on the bottom of the Zoom screen. And we do have a question, Kimberly. Do you have any tips or suggestions for setting those healthy limits that you referenced earlier?
Yes, I mean, in terms of setting healthy limits, really it starts with kind of planning ahead. So if you know there are certain things that can create a lot of stress for you, again, this isn't our first holiday season, so you know kind of where we've had pitfalls years prior in the past, or at family parties and things like that. So you know kind of where, if you have that relative that maybe likes to, may ask more inappropriate questions or make you feel uncomfortable, or if there's a trauma and there's certain family members you're around that trigger that, being aware of that. So really kind of setting realistic expectations for yourself, coming up with like a safety plan or a plan in mind of, okay, if I go to this relative's house and I feel triggered, what are going to be a safe word with a relative or family, or what's going to be my exit plan? So really looking at specifically what is causing some of this anxiety. If you can identify it, sometimes it's so general, we're not sure, and that's okay. But really looking at ways to kind of calm yourself. And sometimes people may, even chew gum or candy, that's shown to kind of help reduce some stress and reduce anxiety. So there's a lot of just little tips that you can use, to make healthy choices and healthy coping choices during that holiday time that can create stress.
Awesome. You talk about maintaining healthy boundaries and focus on what truly matters during the holiday season. Can you talk a little bit about that, a little bit more about that?
Yeah. No, I mean, in terms of healthy boundaries, so for me, it really looks at, you know, you may have a lot of family and friends wanting to get together. They may want to have that cookie exchange. They may want to have that white elephant where you're exchanging gifts. You may have to go to several relatives, maybe one relative's on one side of town, the other relative's over here, and they're overlapping parties. So how do you prioritize? So it's really looking at what you physically are able to do. And everybody is different. So really looking at, if you have a significant other or spouse, like having these discussions prior, like what are we prioritizing, or are we going to rotate one year? We're going to go to your relative, next year mine. How are we going to do that? So that way you're setting realistic expectations for yourself and not overwhelming yourself with trying to spread yourself too thin, because that will create burnout. That will create stress for all of us. It doesn't matter. Like we're one person, we can only do so much. And so understanding those healthy limits, and don't feel guilty, and don't feel that you're ruining the holiday, or you're being kind of a Grinch during the holiday season because you're not doing those things. I think really making sure that you're setting and being able to say no and being okay with that, and not having to explain why you can't do something.
Yeah. Thank you. I really hate sitting around the Thanksgiving table or the Christmas table because Uncle John's going to be there. And, we really don't hit it off well. I've got some really hard feelings and difficult memories come up. How can I deal with that? How can I cope with it?
Well, again, I mean, I think I like to keep ownership of things and say, okay, can we set a limit where we're not going to let this person ruin our holiday? We know how they are, kind of accept them for who they are, not expecting them to be anything than what they are. And then kind of really looking at, okay, what are ways that I can work with myself to say, if I know I'm getting upset, can I go say, oh, I gotta go, oh, I got a phone call, or come up with a distraction that's going to allow you to remove yourself from that situation. Or, oh, wait, I forgot I had to go help Susie in the kitchen. So find a way to easily distract yourself, so you're not going to create a scene. You're not going to feel uncomfortable. You're not going to have this really difficult interaction that's going to make you feel uncomfortable. Just find a very safe way to kind of move through that and remove yourself from that, and not create a lot of drama around it as well. So then you don't feel bad.
Yeah, he's going to create the drama anyway, but thank you. Great tips. I got one more question for you. What would it look like for you to approach the holidays with more compassion for yourself?
I think really, looking at what is best for you. I think the biggest thing is really not comparing to anybody. I think in society, we try to do a lot of comparison, and you see, oh, Susie on social media has the perfect family, the perfect holidays, and her house is decorated to the T. And you may not be able to do that. That may not be within your budget. That may not be who you are as a person. That doesn't mean you're a good mom. That doesn't mean you're a good parent, a good sister, daughter, aunt, whatever, uncle. It's just really looking at setting those realistic expectations and what you want your holiday to be. You are in the driver's seat of what you want for you and your family. And it doesn't have to be what anybody else is doing. Everybody sets their own traditions. And, our traditions, it doesn't have to be like everybody else. You can do what you want. It doesn't mean having a family. Some people go on trips on vacation. Some people just do little small things at home. So whatever that means to you, make sure you're staying true to that because then it's going to help reduce that stress, that anxiety. You're going to actually have a better positive outlook on the holiday and not dread it and actually go through it in a positive way and enjoy it the best that you can.
That's great. Thank you. Mariana, let's look beyond the surface.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
Let's look beyond the surface.
Yes, yes. So I know holidays can be a very triggering time for a lot of people. I know a lot of times they're often seen as joyful, but for a lot of people, they can be very triggering and can bring up a lot of things from the past that might not necessarily be very pleasant to sit with. A lot of times this happens because during the holidays, we're typically blending a lot of different family dynamics, and then also kind of bringing in some memories that aren't always super positive. So, some triggers that we want to just be mindful of, and some things that we want to just kind of stay on top of and consider moving into the holiday season are what your family interactions typically look like, right? So sometimes I come from a humongous Italian family. So I have different interactions with every single person from cousins to aunts to uncles. So walking into it, recognizing which family members do you typically have interactions with that are not always positive, and that we're being aware of what we're walking into. What relatives tend to minimize what we're saying or deny an experience that we've had. There might even be times where we're walking into a family situation where a, if we have a trauma history, the perpetrator might be at this family gathering or be present. So we do want to be mindful of the family interactions and how those things can trigger us. Another trigger that we might want to keep in mind, or any sort of cultural or racial tension that might occur for any sort of couples that are in any sort of interracial relationship. Sometimes there might be some microaggressions or some discrimination that's taking place at the Thanksgiving dinner right at the table sometimes. So just being mindful that we're aware of what these triggers are and how they might sit with us. Any sort of political conversations, I know that those are always really tough when we're with family sometimes. So being mindful that those might be something that's triggering, that they might cause you to feel, invalidated or potentially even unsafe. Loss and grief can also be a very triggering experience, especially if you're coming up on a first holiday without a loved one. Those can be really sensitive times. Something else that we want to be mindful of are the changes in our routine around the holiday. I know for myself, right? I'm a mother. I have two small kiddos. Am I sleeping during the holidays? Absolutely not. I'm running around. I'm trying to make Christmas magic. I'm sleep deprived. A lot of people aren't sleeping around the holidays. There's usually an uptick in substance use. So we might find that we're drinking a little bit more alcohol than we normally would, which might make us a little bit more vulnerable than usual. There might be an use of drugs that might not normally be being used during the year, but are now being used around the holiday, or an increase in those family members that are already struggling. And then a lot of times there's a loss of structure too, right? Kids are home from school. They're home. They're loud. So there's a change in your routine. There's a change in the structure of kind of what's going on in your home. So those things can be very triggering because not only are we adding on the stress of all of the things that we're expected to do around the holidays, now we're doing them with no routine, kids home, it's loud, and trying to navigate what those things look like.
Sure.
And I think a big trigger that I think can kind of that jumps out to me, first and foremost is the financial stress and the unrealistic expectations that sometimes comes along with the holiday. I think that there is an increased pressure on people to perform, and an increased pressure to make sure that you're getting people the gifts that they want and the expensive gifts that they want. And we kind of lose sight of what the holidays should actually be about. And those can often be very triggering for people during this time.
Thank you. Yeah, you talked about recognizing and seeing the triggers and preparing yourself for them. What are some techniques that you can use to cope?
Yeah. So what I would recommend is making sure that we are being anticipatory in what we're going to be facing. So checking in with ourselves and planning ahead before the stress hits, right? So ask yourself, like, what drains my energy during this time of the year? Who drains my energy during this time of the year, right? Like Gary, you said it's your Uncle John,
Yeah.
right? If Uncle John drains your energy, then we know that we're going to want to be anticipatory in dealing with Uncle John this season.
Already looking forward to it. Yeah.
Who makes you feel unsafe, right? What boundaries in the past have I struggled to hold? Um, what would emotional safety look like for me this year? What do I want? How do I want to feel? And what do I need to accomplish that? Right. So if that means Uncle John is going to show up for Thanksgiving dinner and he is going to completely make me feel unsafe, or we've had a past trauma history where I know I cannot be in that space, I might make a different arrangement for myself. So I'll have a plan set in place of, okay, maybe I'll go, but the second we start talking about X, Y, and Z topics, I'm going to excuse myself. I'll get up and I'll leave. I'll head home. Making sure that you have that plan beforehand. You'll want to set boundaries in advance. I think once you've identified what your triggers are, like again, so who's making you feel drained, who's making you feel unsafe, what boundaries am I struggling with? Once you've identified those, then that's when you want to start focusing on coming up with, like Kim was saying, what your coping plan will look like, right? So what boundaries do I want to make sure I'm following? What's going to be my exit plan if something comes up and I feel like I need to excuse myself? Where might my safe space be, right? If we're meeting at grandma's this season, is there a place I can go in that moment? Is there a walk I can take? Is there a person I can call? Is there something I can do within the environment that will help me reset? Something I would recommend too is if you are somebody who already goes to therapy, if you want to start role playing maybe with your therapist, some challenging conversations that you think might come up, that would be in anticipation for a tough conversation you think you'll be having. That would be a really great use of therapy time. Mm-hmm. And making sure that you're really surrounding yourself with your support systems. Again, having people that you can check in with in these moments, and working on having a plan to help you regulate yourself in the moment. So if you're a person who practices mindfulness or meditation or journaling, making sure that you're prepared to bring those skills with you into the moment. The goal for being in a triggering situation is making sure that you're responding intentionally instead of impulsively.
Awesome. Thank you. Before we move on to trauma response versus emotional overwhelm, I had a question that was asked, and I'll throw this out to the group. I'll start with you, Mariana. How do I cope with loneliness during the holidays?
Yeah, that's a really good question because loneliness around the holidays is so common. And the best approach is to really try to build an intentional connection and some structure. I always encourage people to plan ahead and try to identify at least one person or a group or an activity that bring some sort of meaning and schedule it into the week. I think that having some small doses of connection counts. Um, I think even joining a virtual support group, attending a community event. I know right now there are so many different community events for to volunteer, like maybe feeding the homeless, or there's different like gift wrapping events that are going on. Finding a way just to reduce isolation and increase purpose during this time is helpful. Um, I also like to remind people to create their own traditions. Um, it's really, especially if the holidays are different this year than they were last year, right? Like when we touch on some grief and loss. If there's something that's different for you this year, I really encourage people to try to create their own traditions. And it doesn't have to be something extravagant. It doesn't have to be a ski trip in Montana in a cabin. It can be something like a special meal, or just a day where you're taking care of yourself and just doing self-care all day, or maybe a reflective ritual where you're still incorporating your loved one into this new ritual so that they're still feeling very much a part of the season.
Great
It's
stuff.
okay. Yeah, it's okay. Like the main thing I want to drive home is that it's okay to name loneliness, and it is okay to reach out for support, even if it's briefly, because it is not a strength. I'm sorry, it is not a weakness. It is a strength to be able to name it and get support.
Do you know of any virtual support groups right now?
I can send you a list.
Okay, someone had asked that question, so
Sure.
all right. Kimberly, can you add to that at all? Great stuff,
Yeah.
Mariana.
No, absolutely. I mean, and kind of, going off of what Mariana said too, I definitely think I love around the holidays, for people that maybe I remember when I was in college and things, if you're in college or have, you maybe can't come home for Thanksgiving. So you're there and you may connect with one of your friends' parents and go to their house. And it may not be your same traditions. So again, being okay with that, or just saying, you know what, maybe I, like Mariana said, doing some self-care, being at home. I think it's so empowering and powerful to be able to be comfortable with yourself, to be able to be okay in just being by yourself and loving yourself, to be able to just sit there and relax and not feel like no one cares about me. You're making that choice. You can make that choice to decide, I want to have the holiday by myself and just watch Christmas movies or make a special meal or just do things for yourself. And if you do feel lonely, like I said, like Mariana said, volunteering, I think, is such a great way to help because you're giving back to others and it helps you be appreciative of what you do have: a roof over your head, food, some family and friends, and that you're making a choice maybe this year that you want to be by yourself. You could, I think anybody really could be around other people if we really tried hard enough. So sometimes it's maybe not loneliness, it's you're just being selective in who you want to surround yourself by and understanding you're setting firm boundaries to know maybe being around these people, maybe they're more toxic and draining to me and not as positive. So I'm going to make this choice to not interact with them. And that's okay. So I think really looking at healthy ways, volunteering at pet shelters, animals can be very helpful and powerful. There's Christmas concerts and Christmas, plays and things. So do something that may make you feel, happy around the holidays that you enjoy. And don't be so tied into you have to always be with someone. It's okay to be by yourself. And it's comforting to know that you can. It's a
Good
good
stuff.
positive strength.
Good stuff. Ulyssa, what can you add?
Yes, I think that Kimberly and Mariana have both like brought up some really good key points. I think I would only add um, finding ways to feel connected in the same way that you guys were saying, but also I was thinking maybe there may be a coffee shop local that you like to go in and just kind of sit there, sit outside of your house, get outside of where you're at. Maybe if you're okay with crowds, you can go into a mall, walk around. And I know there's always Starbucks and whatnot in the malls, and you can go there, purposely put yourself in situations where you will not be alone.
Good stuff. Good stuff. All right, Mariana, let's get back to you. Um, can you talk a little bit about the difference between trauma response and emotional overwhelm?
Yeah, that's a really great question. Thank you. So, a trauma response is typically something that is automatic. It happens quickly. It's a more survival based in reaction. So it's your body's way of responding and telling you, I'm not safe right now. Right. So that might look like fight or flight or freeze. Right. Or you might completely shut down. And oftentimes it's not proportionate to the situation or the moment that you're in because it's connected to a past threat. Emotional overwhelm is when your current stress is simply just exceeding your capacity to handle it. So it's more about depletion, whereas a trauma response is more about survival. Typically, you can check in with yourself if you're trying to determine, like, am I just overwhelmed right now, or is this a trauma response? I recommend checking in by asking yourself a few questions. So what you're going to want to check in on is asking, okay, am I reacting to something that's threatening my safety right now? Am I grounded in the present moment, or am I having a flashback, or am I reliving something that occurred to me in the past? And is my body signaling panic, numbness, detachment? In either case, grounding, validation, and safety need to come before problem solving. So before you can jump into trying to solve any of those issues, you want to make sure that you are in a place of groundedness, even while you're doing your best to answer the questions that you're asking yourself.
Wow. Okay. Thank you. And before we transition over to Ulyssa, Mariana, what is one key takeaway you'd like people to remember as we move through the holiday?
As we transition into the holidays, I think it's important to remember that if we view the holidays through a trauma-informed lens, we can create space for safety, for healing, and for some authentic connection. The holidays are not about having a perfect season. They're about honoring what your limits are, protecting your peace of mind, and being able to show compassion for others, but more importantly, being able to show compassion for yourself.
Great. Thank you. Ulyssa, what can we add to this? We've had a great discussion, lots of questions.
Yes, we have. Alrighty, so I'll be focusing on navigating difficult family dynamics. I'm going to be tying in a lot of what Kimberly and Mariana have already said and just kind of expanding off of those ideas.
Great.
So kind of like what you guys have already heard, the holidays bring such a mix of excitement, a little bit of pressure in there as well. And what's meant to be a bit of a joyful time can stir up such a lot of old tension and unresolved conflict at times, especially when you come from a family that may have history of any sort of hurt, criticism, or forms of instability. It's very, very normal for you to feel anxious during this time. You're not alone if these types of things resonate with you. The biggest thing that I want to drive home for you guys is preparing emotionally. So again, kind of piggybacking off what we talked about earlier, identifying those triggers. So really kind of sitting with yourself and prepping. Prep work and prep time is going to be super essential. Something that may be triggering for you is a specific topic. So you might want to think about those things. That subject that gets brought up can bring you right back into your old ways, even though you've done all this growth and work around growing yourself and healing. Conversations about weight might be triggering for you, parenting choices, career decisions that you've made. Money can trigger those old insecurities or expectations. So there may even be a tone. Someone's tone of voice can bring you right back and can activate your old role within your family a lot faster than words specifically. But if there's a dismissive comment or a sarcastic remark, someone speaking to you like you're a child, all these things can just bring you right back. No matter how much growth you have, if you are just sunken into it, you might feel trapped in those moments. There may be a specific family member who we've talked about. For everyone, we may have someone in our family that just loves to ignore our limits. It dismisses when you say no. They may feel entitled to comment on your life in ways that you just don't want any sort of unsolicited advice. They may, demand emotional labor from you. Again, these behaviors are going to just pull you right back. So it's just, you might, once you feel that you're going over, over explaining, you're reacting to sorts of behaviors towards you. You just want to understand first and foremost what unsettles you before you enter a situation, so you can go into it with a lot more clarity and you don't have as much surprises. So preparing yourself emotionally and then practicing your boundaries ahead of time. Key thing to remember is that boundaries don't create distance, rather, they create clarity for you. So think ahead of time about what phrases you want to use. I'd rather not talk about that today. Or let's keep the conversation light. These are helpful little phrases that you could just kind of throw out there when the tension in the room feels like it's escalating. You know, you don't have to go into debating over your boundaries. Be very calm, clear. That's most often the most effective way for you to communicate. And then I also want to bring up that stepping away, giving yourself that permission to have that space. So when it starts to feel overwhelmed, you are within your right to go outside. Go outside, go for a walk, check in with someone that supports you, someone that you know you can trust. You don't owe anyone constant access to your time or your emotional energy. So keep that with you too. The minute have silent check-ins with yourself. How am I feeling? You might want to put it on a rating scale. Oh, I'm starting to dip down. I feel like I'm at about a 1 or a 2. Maybe I'll go to the bathroom. Maybe I'll go to the bathroom, wash my hands, just physically remove yourself. The same way I said earlier about like physically removing yourself and going outside and feeling connected to others. Physically remove yourself from the situation that's making you feel overwhelmed, even if it's just for a couple minutes.
Great stuff.
Your emotional safety is a valid priority. It definitely is something that you need to prioritize. So if you want to leave early, you want to shorten a visit, you want to maybe only attend certain events. I know, for example, like my family does a really big Christmas Eve, and it can go all day. So if potentially I didn't want to be there all day, maybe I want to go for a 2-hour block. I want to go into that with the intention of having an end time. I don't maybe have to stay till 10 o'clock at night. I can leave at 8:30 if I want to. Or you can choose to not attend things at all. That is okay too, to just not attend things because you don't owe anyone your presence at the expense of your peace.
Exactly. I say, I'm thinking back to Uncle John, and before going in and having Uncle John there, I say, please give me the patience, or else I'm going to need bail money. Um, so, let's talk about wanting to see your family, but also wanting to avoid conflict. What are some healthy ways to avoid that tension?
I think it's important to note that two things can be true, right? You can want to feel connection, but then you can also want peace. So when those feelings collide, just really checking in and being self-aware about what your own capacity is. So kind of going back to, I want to be there, but what are some ways that will make it most comfortable for me to show up? How can I be my best self? Does that mean I have to shorten my visit? Does it mean that I only attend events that are at neutral locations? For example, if there's a birthday party outside of someone's home and it's somewhere, or there is a Thanksgiving dinner at a hall and you would prefer to do locations that are neutral, or again, having a planned end time. What do they call it? A social battery. How much time do you have in you to give to someone else? And be very, very realistic, checking in with yourself.
I like that social battery. Yeah. Great. Thank you. What advice do you have for someone who feels anxious about seeing a family member, Uncle John, that they've had a complicated history with?
My biggest, and I feel most helpful strategy is really playing over that scenario in your mind ahead of time. So imagine the type of tone you want to use, imagine maybe some boundaries that you want to be able to maintain, but most importantly, emphasize how you want to feel after that interaction. So once you leave that interaction, are you feeling drained? What is the ultimate goal you're trying to get to? Having some simple exit phrases like I need a moment, let's change the topic. It puts you in this environment where you're able to control. So if you practice, take a moment to practice in the mirror, verbally say the word so that you get those that your mouth going, you're used to it, it flow right off the tongue when you're in the moment and you have to say it. It will help if you say it ahead of time as well, even if you're practicing in the mirror.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you. What would you say to someone who ends up feeling guilty for setting boundaries or skipping a family gathering? You had talked about that too.
Yeah, a lot of times, this guilt, and I think we maybe mentioned the family roles, but expanding more, like guilt comes from those old family roles that we're learned to play and we're learned to show up as. So, some roles are the caretaker, the fixer, the peacemaker, to name just a few of them. But boundaries do not mean that you're turning away from your family. In turn, you're actually turning towards yourself in a healthier way. So just remembering that when you protect your energy, that allows you to show up in those relationships with patience, less resentment, and that's going to benefit everyone at the end of the day.
Thank you. Thank you for that. One last question for you, Ulyssa. How do you say no to taking on additional tasks in a way that doesn't ruin your relationship?
This is a good one. Saying no, I love to say, is no is a full sentence. We don't have to give explanations, but in the event that we're trying to savor this relationship, what can be useful is saying, you're appreciating, but also providing some clarity. So thank you for thinking of me, but I can't take that on right now. And if it feels like appropriate for you, you can even offer an explanation. And only if this really kind of feels good for you, you're not putting yourself in a position where you're trying to people please. But if you say, hey, I can't do this, but I can do this, by offering that explanation, again, no long explanations are needed, but being honest, clear, just protects your energy and that relationship too.
Great stuff. Before we conclude, any final thoughts?
I wanted to just kind of go into codependency and enmeshment, because that can happen a lot in the holidays and around this time. So the line between love and enmeshment can get confusing, especially during the holidays, because they both can feel like closeness. So I wanted to just kind of go over with you guys. Healthy love, you'll be able to say no without feeling guilty. You can disagree without it turning into a crisis. You can care about someone without carrying their stress on your shoulders. Now, in enmeshment, you're going to feel responsible for people feeling happy. You change your behavior so that you don't upset them. You feel anxious when they feel anxious, even when it has nothing to do with you. So you can stay connected without absorbing everything. Detaching with compassion, means that you're able to care about them, but you don't have to take ownership of people's emotions. And that can show up a lot of times in these family dynamics during the holidays.
Awesome. Thank you. Before we transition back over to Kimberly, I wanted to share something with you all. Hopefully you can see this. Is that showing up on the screen, everyone? The virtual support groups?
It is, yes. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yep.
So Mariana had provided this. I know there was a question on that. Maybe you could take a picture or write it down quickly. And if you didn't get it, shoot me an email and I can send the list out to you all. All right, Kimberly, let's wrap this up.
So just, talking about what I talked about, and then Mariana and Ulyssa as well, is, there's a theme of just really going into the holiday season, preparing for, to enjoy the holiday the best that you can by setting yourself up for success in terms of literally looking at setting those healthy boundaries, being okay with saying no, really looking at what you need, looking at what is reasonable for you and not compare what anybody else is doing. What do you feel for you and your family is going to be the best? And just for you in general, with any trauma history or issues with family, really look at, is this codependence? Is this really, something that I can maybe not go to, or do I need to not go to, or do I need to set a healthy limit? So really, as we're adults, we get to pick. When you're children, you don't get to pick what you get to do. You're kind of just going along with the flow and doing that. As an adult, this is where you do get to decide, like, if the family traditions and things that you grew up in is what you want, or do you want to set a different routine? Do you want to try different things? Do you want to set it differently so you feel like you are part of the process, not just going through the motions, which we do sometimes with, oh, this is what the traditions are, but no, being able to have control of that and really setting, your priorities and what you feel is best for you and your family, and not feeling guilty about that. And that is the hardest part, is to not feel guilty. So really looking at taking care of yourself, self-care during the holidays, really looking in if you need to reach out to family and friends for support, setting, having those plans, like Ulyssa said, for trauma, and Mariana as well, having those kind of thought out conversations in your mind. Well, okay, like Gary said, his Uncle John, like every year, it's kind of the same thing. It's not something you should be surprised about. So how am I going to prepare myself to manage the situation, knowing that maybe, this relative may continue to, instigate or create drama or create, some trigger my trauma during the holidays? How can I set myself, apart where I could still enjoy the function and be around my family, but now remove myself safely, have a plan, go for a walk, go to the bathroom, have a drink of water, calm yourself down, and then reintegrate back in. So ultimately, really just taking the holiday kind of a day by day, taking it slow, going in there with the understanding that you're going to make it the best that you can, and that's going to be good enough. And really try to enjoy it and make it yours and be part of the process as much as you can.
Great. Thank you. Well, another question just came in, and I'll throw this out to the group. I don't have enough money to buy presents for my kids this year. It's really tough. I really feel guilty. Kimberly.
I always say, it's who's around the tree, not what's under the Christmas tree. So I mean, I understand, we live in a materialistic world and there's a lot of pressure on gifts and, well, look at Johnny got this for Christmas and why didn't I get this? So really, again, not comparing, but really looking with the children. I've found for these situations when we volunteer, take them to a soup kitchen, take them to places where maybe other kids don't have as much, and they start to see that maybe it's not so bad, that maybe they do have more than they think. So kind of regrounding them, but also maybe looking at, local communities. A lot of places do volunteering. A lot of people will regift. You could look at like some of the communities, depending on your towns, may have a on Facebook Marketplace, they have like open things where people can give away, pretty lightly, gently used toys. So kind of looking at those things, looking at you can kind of get onto some of those groups and see if you can find presents, maybe creating gifts, making it more of a interactive present together where you could do something together as a family, making, being creative and kind of making something where you can go to a destination where maybe it's not it's not the Bahamas or a beach trip, but maybe go somewhere and, have a little scavenger hunt. So again, I think creativity sometimes trumps, that dollar sign attached to the present. So having it mean something and creating memories that maybe are priceless and don't have a price tag attached to it. I think that could be a great way to do it.
Great. Thank you. Mariana.
Yeah, I think a lot of people feel guilty when they can't afford gifts during the holidays. It's important to remember that the value you bring to people in your life has nothing to do with money. The holidays
Very true.
were never meant to be a financial performance. They're meant to be about connection, intention, and presence and physical presence. If money's tight, which it is for a lot of people right now, focus on the things that are within your control. So some of the things Kimberly was just kind of speaking on, like offering your time, writing a heartfelt note, sharing a tradition, maybe cooking something special, making a memory together. Often those gestures land deeper than anything store-bought. And just keep in mind as well, like during this time, that financial hardship is not a moral failure. Um, it's a circumstance.
Right.
So I think sometimes the guilt comes from pressure to meet expectations that you didn't even create. So realizing that pressure and prioritizing connection over cost can be very empowering. So just remember, it's presence, not presence. And take that with you.
Thank you. Ulyssa, anything to add?
Yeah, again, you guys brought up great topics. The only thing that I would add is that I always have said, some of my favorite, so growing up, my favorite adults, my uncles, my aunts, I cannot tell you what gifts they ever bought me as a child growing
No.
up. I can't even tell you what gifts my parents got me for Christmas, besides the first TV I ever got in my bedroom. Other than that, nothing is really memorable. So I think when we remind each other that it's really about the time we invest in one another and the way that we're making each other feel, especially as, the people that we're buying gifts for tend to be the kiddos, but the kiddos aren't really going to remember what we're getting. We want to invest in them. We want to know them. We want to know their interests. We want to take special interest in what they like, what they don't like, and just spending that time, I think, is more valuable than any gift we'll ever buy. So kind of just sticking to that.
Great. Thank you. All right, before we completely wrap it up, I just want to throw out there again, if you have a question, type it into the Q&A box. And while you're thinking of that, I want to remind or let everyone know that on December 8th, we are having our December webinar. And actually, Ulyssa Lopez is going to be running this webinar, and it's going to be about understanding and supporting grief together. Great topic, especially around the holidays. And you will all be receiving an invite to that as well. So, ask again, no questions. All right. Oh, wait, got one. Wait, pull it up. How do you manage recent loss during the holidays? Niece and nephews, ages 8 and 13, lost their father this week. Oh, how sad. How do you support them, and how do you support the family? Mariana.
Yeah. So managing a loss, especially this was fresh. This was last week, you said,
Yeah,
Gary?
yeah,
Yeah. That is incredibly hard. And there's not really a right way to do it. I usually tell people to try to focus on three things: permission to feel what you need to feel, permission for them to feel what they need to feel. Grief isn't linear, and so it can show up for different people in different ways. It can show up as sadness, it can be numbness, it can be anger, then there might be a moment of peace. All of that is completely normal. So making sure that we're giving these kiddos the permission to feel what they need to feel because they're not wrong, and no matter how it shows up for them. The other thing I like to focus on is pacing yourself. Don't force them to be okay. Don't force them to move too quickly. We just want to set small, manageable goals for them each day. And those things can be so small, they could be like getting out of bed, eating, taking a shower, calling somebody. With grief that large, it's okay if we're looking at small victories, just like getting out of bed or brushing your teeth, as a big win. Last is support. The fact that you're here for your niece and nephew already speaks volumes to me that you are someone that they trust, and continuing to be there for them as a person that they trust to join in on their grief. I might even recommend that they see a counselor, depending on how they're adjusting and how things are going. I don't know the details around what happened, but potentially having them seek therapy just so that they know that this isn't something that they have to figure out by themselves. And just reminding them that grief, like I said, is not linear. It feels, out of all the emotions, I always say this, out of all the emotions on the gamut, in my opinion, grief is one of the hardest ones because it can take so long to work through. Then you think you're okay, and then you're backsliding. Grief is really tough. So it doesn't mean that they're broken. It means that they care deeply. And it's okay for them to know that healing does not mean they're forgetting. It means they're learning how to carry what happened while also holding compassion for themselves.
Great. Awesome. Ulyssa.
Yeah, so that is a tough one, especially with it being so fresh. Again, just to piggyback off, really allowing those feelings to take space. They're gonna feel big, so we have to make lots of room for those big feelings as they come. I think that something that is helpful, especially with kiddos, is doing small things to just honor that person in ways are that feel good for you. Playing a favorite song, if they have a favorite holiday song, maybe watching a favorite movie. Another thing that you could do is saving a seat for them at the table. You might leave a seat empty, maybe put their picture there, or maybe just a blanket, but just making room for them and making room for your feelings and it's really tricky with the kiddos and it being fresh, but those are some things that I think that I thought about top of my head.
Great. Thank you. Kimberly.
Yeah, I mean, you guys covered a lot, but also like when I've worked with kids that have had such significant loss, I found it really helpful. Like Mariana said, grief is they have the, Kubler-Ross's 8 stages of grief, but everybody processes it so differently. So I never look at it as a linear thing. It's very circular, going back and forth. And again, you let them process it at the rate that they can. The biggest thing, though, I found with kids is to create some type of safety. So they've already had this huge loss, this huge change. We feel like in life we can control things. And when things like this happen, we realize there's things out of our control. And that could really be scary to a child, especially if it's a significant person, their family, mom or dad. So really looking at how do we create that safe space? How do we initiate that for them? Trying to limit as much change as possible, trying to keep, some of those consistencies that we've done in the past as best as they can if they can keep up with those. But the biggest thing is allowing them that safe space to communicate how they're feeling at any point. I've found to be really helpful for kids journaling their thoughts. They can do like a letter, a goodbye letter. What would they want to say? Like kind of something like that. I've had kids draw their feelings and what they're feeling out, and that can be really helpful as well. So really just identifying what the child's strengths are and what the child's interests are and trying to tie something in along those lines that are going to build them and keep them positive through this difficult time. I found that to be really, really helpful. Therapy can be very helpful again, but not pushing the child to talk about it too soon. Like, how do you feel? Like, again, as adults, we want to feel like we're doing everything we can and we want to help them talk about it, but it has to be at their own time or we can re-traumatize them with that loss. So just being there and letting them know I'm here at any point, whenever you want to talk about, and we're here, and just providing that constant supporting, letting them know it's okay. Especially sometimes for males, it's very hard. Sometimes they don't want to cry. Sometimes society gives this impression that you can't cry, you have to internalize it. And I want, boys and girls to understand, like, if they need to cry, if they need to talk about it, it's okay. Whatever you're feeling is normal for you, and that's okay. We're not going to judge, and that we're here.
Great, thank you. Lots of good stuff came out of this roundtable discussion. I hope you all enjoyed it and got something from it. I did record this, so if you would like a recorded copy, just shoot me an email. You all have my email address. And remember, this is Real Help. We meet you where you're at, providing a virtual mental health counseling services 24/7. Thank you, everyone. Have a great Thanksgiving and holiday season.